Hey, good morning everybody. It is Sunday, November 3rd, 2019. It is 11:25 a.m. as we speak, and yes, it is standard time. You probably saw that with the little video I put up late last night, where it went from 1:59 back to 1. Yes, we have fallen back into regular time. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is basically some web recommendations, one I've made before and one I want to make even though I've talked about him before. Hey guys, yeah, the web recommendations I want to make are a few people that I've talked about before, mainly because they've come up with some new stories. The first one I want to talk about is MrInternetMan. Now, I've talked about him many times before here on my channel, but the reason I bring him up is because of the fact that he recently released a new webcomic in time for Halloween called Witchy Women. Long story short, he brought together two women, or two witchy hag women, or haggy witches, if you will, that he's introduced to us in previous stories, and decided to bring them together in this story. Now, both basically have similar, if not identical, powers to where they can shapeshift the body from being an old, haggard witch to that of a seductive, luscious woman. And I am doing this unscripted and on the fly, so I do apologize. But basically, where they could change themselves from being an old, haggard witch to a very seductive, luscious woman. And that's exactly what they both do. And in tradition with a lot of his stories, and I say this with no offense, but in a tradition with a lot of Mr. Internet's stories, or Mr. Internetman's stories, of course the moment that happens, and I'm just checking something there, the moment that happens, of course you gotta have both women make out with each other. So, anyway, long story short, the reason he brought both characters together is because they both agreed to combine their powers and to see how much more powerful they can be once they do. So of course this results in what's known as the fusion, and they fuse into one witch, one seductive, luscious, witchy woman. Now, long story short there, for a time they change different forms. They change into different women, if you will. They go from being a Snow White-like woman to a Amazon-like warrior to a pirate to a succubus, and then to basically fully clad in leather with a witch's hat witch, if you will. So they end up basically combining, fusing, merging together, and going through all those different forms. And the catch here, and just a bit of spoilers if you haven't, read the story yet, if you do follow Mr. Internetman on DeviantArt, the catch basically is, even after they combine together to become this one seductive, witchy woman that goes through all these different personas, these different forms, like I said, the Snow White, the pirate, the Amazon, the succubus, the empress, whatever. After they go through all that, and they get to that final form where, like I said, they're all clad in black and they got the witch's hat. The catch throughout all this, and even when they get to that final form for a bit, is they kept referring to themselves, even in this one combined body, they keep referring to themselves as we, like we'll become the most powerful, we'll be able to do this, we'll be able to do that, ... So, as you could expect, and you probably can predict this already without me telling you, as we get closer to the final pages of this webcomic, there's a line where, in the final form, like I said, in that final witch's form with the witch's hat and the leather-clad outfit, or catsuit as they call it, one of the last lines they say is, "Soon we'll become but then they stop and says, and then the word no shows up, and then all of a sudden on the last panel of one of the last pages it says soon all become. Because basically what happened, as predicted, they went from referring to themselves as we, being two separate individuals, to just one persona, one being. Long story short, this new persona basically has taken over, combined the mentalities and personalities of both into one, acknowledges, where she came from, basically acknowledges that the two beings she used to be are not, what's the word I'm looking for, are not proper for the form she has now taken on, and that now she will be in their place. She will take over in their place as Mystica. Yeah, that's what her name is. We find out is revealed at the end. Her name is Mystica. So, long story short, if you guys do follow MrInternetMan, or you're looking for something that was Halloween themed, and you're still kind of in a Halloween mood a little bit, especially with this being the Day of the Dead weekend, check out Witchy Women on DeviantArt at MrInternetMan.com or MrInternetMan.deviantart.com. Check it out. You'll really enjoy it. He's also done some other stories as well in between. He's continued his brand new You series where he's taking some established characters and just like Marvel characters and DC characters and anime characters, and has had them don these costumes and become different individuals, personality-wise and everything. But he's also done something as well, and I talked about this one time in a video. He did another Demonica webcomic which crosses over with Minor-Alterations Ruby Walker character called Walk on the Wild Side. And just checking something there. And the Walk on the Wild Side story, basically, long story short, has Demonica use her powers to turn both her and Ruby into slime girls. Full-on slime girls, to where, long story short, by using her powers, she shows Ruby the wonders. She shows Ruby the wonders of what being a slime girl, because the one thing Minor-Alterations has done, I'm just getting my dog in there. I'm just getting my dog in here. But like I said, the one thing that Minor-Alterations has done, basically, when doing the crossover story called Demonica over on their page, on their DeviantArt page, the one thing they've done, hold on for a sec. The one thing they've done, like I said, the one thing they've done, when they've done the crossover story, the written crossover story, because it's a story, it's not a comic, it's a story. Although MrInternetMan does help out with sometimes with illustrations here and there. Long story short, I'm sorry for the distraction there, but the one thing they have done with the Ruby Walker character, ever since she's encountered Demonica, is give her a love to just want to melt down into a liquid. Just melt and become a puddle of ooze. So, anyway, long story short, in the Walk on the Wild Side comic that MrInternetMan did in response, basically, Demonica shows Ruby the thrills of what being a slime girl is about, what, abilities they have, And just like with Witchy Women, what happens is they end up going through the motions, and they end up, because of that, fusing together to where it's identified in these little speech bubbles, because the speech bubbles are identified by the color that represents them, like red represents Ruby, purple represents Demonica. So now the speech bubbles are interlacing with each other. So instead of being individual, they're kind of interlacing together to where both are referring to each other as I, or I, and all that. And in the end, what happens is they end up becoming this one being made of black goop, if you will. It's kind of a black slime girl color that's able to stretch her body into all different things. And the comic just ends, and some people found this a little bit abrupt, but the comic just ends with the new combined form just splatting itself, splitting itself all over Ruby's bed. We assume it's Ruby Walker's bed. All over her bed, like a little, and thus adjusting herself into what looks like a little makeshift pool or something. So yeah, check that story out. Now, the other person I want to recommend, he's very well known. I don't think he really needs I don't think he needs, what I'm trying to say, any introduction. I don't think he needs any introduction, and that's Eric Schwartz. Eric Schwartz, of course, is known for Sabrina Online and other animations he's done, like Amy the Squirrel, Flip the Frog, his interpretation of Flip the Frog. You know, stuff like that. Now, one thing people may or may not know about Eric, and I'm sure a lot of you do, is Eric is also known not just for Sabrina Online, not just for Amy the Squirrel, not just for Sabrina, not just for Zigzag, who's become a very popular character, or, like I said, Flip the Frog, or any of the other characters, but he's also known for something else. It's called Fur After Dark, and this is more of a adult themed website that he has, that he also has a Patreon for. Yes, he has a Patreon for Fur After Dark. He has two separate Patreons. One is for Sabrina, the other is for Fur After Dark, although he kind of gets both mixed up a little bit, or something like that. Because there are times he'll put Sabrina, the newest panels and comic book pages of the Sabrina Online story, on the same Patreon as, let's say, his Fur After Dark stories are. But anyway, yeah, he does what's known as Fur After Dark, and sometimes they involve original characters that we don't really see in the Sabrina universe. So that's kind of cool. He gives us a bit of a variety. A variety is what I'm trying to say. He gives us a bit of a variety. However, most times his stories will involve characters out of the Sabrina universe. Sabrina Online universe, that is. So, two of his more recent stories in the past year or so, have involved Zigzag. Yes, Zigzag, who's a prominent main character in the Sabrina Online stories, and who is known as being an adult movie star, and owner of her own studios called Double Z Studios, is most times, when it comes to these adult themed stories featuring the Sabrina Online characters, not Sabrina herself, but the other characters at times, like Zigzag, she's the most prominent. She was in one of the first adult themed stories that I saw her in was, I'm trying to think. It was basically when she encountered Helena Dish, one of the other side characters in the Sabrina Online universe, to find out, because basically the story takes place when she's trying to find the trolls that are trolling her on the internet, and she encounters Helena Dish, who's the mother of one of the trolls that's doing it, and you kind of can assume what goes on from there. Well, the new story that she's involved in is called A Hairy Encounter. And this involves her and her new studio's hairstylist, Katrina. I think that's her name. And Katrina basically seems to be down-to-earth, home-style kind of girl, but the way the story's being depicted is it's being depicted as her being like down-to-earth, home-style and all that, you know, raised right, but looks with that kind of an individual can be deceiving. So, You have to check the story out yourself. It's just kind of started up. He's on the, I think what is he on, the third or fourth page now. But you can definitely tell as you get to these pages that it's really starting to pick up. Like you kind of see where it's going to be heading really, really soon. And the way both stories, the story with Hell in a Dish and this one starts is with Sabrina being told the story by one of the participants involved. The first time was by Zigzag. This one is done by Katrina. I think that's her name. And it's done through flashback. So you get Sabrina involved, but you have Sabrina being basically in our shoes as the viewer. You have her in our shoes as the viewer, as the listener. So she can kind of imagine in her mind, picture in her mind exactly what, Katrina or previously Zigzag is telling her occurred between them, between the individuals involved, I should say, in the story. Or basically she can imagine, what I'm trying to say is she can imagine in her mind, she can picture in her mind, whether she wants to or not, exactly what those individuals did. So yeah, he's got a new story. So yeah, Eric Schwartz has a new story called A Hairy Encounter, which is part of his Fur After Dark series. Now, some people may not be a fan of that, but again, you got to remember, one of his mainstay characters in the Sabrina-Online universe is an adult film star who owns the studio she actually performs at. So you have to have stories that involve her in that manner. So what better way to do that than to do a side project, a side website, and a side Patreon dedicated to that. So that's what's going on. So basically that's what's happening there, and I truly recommend you guys check it out. The other one I want to suggest right now, the two last ones I want to suggest are by Jaquelidor, I think. I can't pronounce his DeviantArt name real well. But Jaquelidor, he does this story called M to M, Metamorphosis to Memorability or something like that. And it features a character called Briella and her friend Alicia, I think, or Alyssa. But Briella's the main character. Long story short, Briella gets infected by some chemicals that give her the ability to shapeshift into anything she wants, melt down into a puddle of goo, relax as a puddle of goo, and just have fun with these new powers. Be a little mischiefy, do this, do that, whatever. Now, the story series has taken on some interesting traits. It's gained some interesting character developments. One, we found out in earlier parts or midway through the stories and all that if Briella changes herself into something for too long, and unless she has some kind of suggestion or some kind of acknowledgement or word given to her about who she really is or who she is, she'll completely forget who she is. Yeah. She'll completely forget who she is. For example, there's a moment midway through the story series where she changes into a dog named Maggie, and basically she, without really practicing this form as long as she should, allows the Maggie persona to take over, and basically she forgets who she really was. It isn't until she sees Alyssa, her BFF, crying and wondering did she lose her friend forever, that it finally snaps her out of it and she's able to restore herself back to normal. But she learns a lesson in the process that, hey, if I'm going to do something that complicated again, I got to have practice enough to where I know I'll be able to come back. And recently they touched upon this because she wanted to practice with her friend's help on being something inanimate. Basically being something inanimate to kind of like, let's say, infiltrate or something like that down the line. So And it's a callback to an earlier portion in the story, because basically in one of the earlier entries in the story, she pretended to be a blanket to keep her friend, who kind of drank a little too much and couldn't really drive home or anything, keep her warm. So she changed herself into a blanket and started to think of herself as the blanket. Basically say, you know, she's here to keep her friend warm and all that. And in the process, not only did she start thinking herself as a blanket, but slowly but surely the persona of just being a blanket took over. So in other words, she went from thinking herself as Briella to being like, I'm a blanket. This is my job. I'm here to keep this person warm. And again, it was a call. That's what this newest entry in the story series was a callback to. Basically, a callback to her basically saying, okay, you know, let me pretend to be a slipcover on the couch and see what happens. And she finds out basically that by having somebody sit on them or use them, or use her, I should say, that the mentality of, okay, this is what I'm meant to do now, you know, comes into play. And she basically takes on the persona of just being a slipcover, like, this is my job. Why should I worry about what they're talking about? I'm just a slipcover kind of deal. But they find out that the best way to snap her out of it is to say her name a few times, to where it finally dawns on her, oh yeah, that's who I am, let me change back. So it's a very interesting story. This has some ups and downs, some moments here and there. They've even went into a bit of espionage, if you will, lately. So that's going to probably play in later on. But it's a really, really intriguing story, so I would check it out. And then the other thing I want to suggest is Minor-Alterations. Of course, it's the Monica series, which he hasn't really touched upon too much lately. I'm guessing personal life has come into play. But definitely check that out, because now it's really getting interesting. It's really getting interesting because now what's happened is Veronica, if you will, has these different personas. One of them is known as Monica. So the Monica character, who's a more seductive character, but is willing to give people what they want if they do a great job and they're willing to listen, basically gives Ruby a taste of her and Demonica's powers, or basically Demonica's powers, to be able to do what she wants, when she wants, shapeshift, do this, meltdown, whatever. So Ruby is at first hesitant, but then decides to just accept what's happened, you know, and utilize the powers given to her, and thus she creates a new persona called Justine, short for Justice. So that's where we went from there, and there's even a quick side story dedicated to that that kind of connects to the main story. But again, Minor-Alterations, as far as I know, maybe he added to it today, I don't know, has yet to add a little bit more to it. But again, I'm guessing personal life may have come into play. We'll have to wait and see. But those are the web recommendations, guys, I wanted to make. I know the video went a lot longer than it should. I do apologize. Like I said, I was just waking up, just getting my coffee. And again, like I said, this is unscripted and uncut. But those are just the web recommendations I wanted to make. Let me know what you think down below. If you've checked any of them out. If not, check them out. I'm sure they'll appreciate your viewership and your watching and reading of the stories. But again, just let you know about those guys. Some of you may or may not know. And that's about it. So let me know down below what your thoughts are. And I'll talk to you later. Sorry about that. I'll talk to you later.